Hello and welcome everyone to the Polity Primer series of Drishti IAS. My name is Pragya, and in today's interesting episode of Polity Primer, we are going to study about a very important constitutional right that has been given to every accused person in India. The title of our today's discussion is Right to Silence. In this discussion, we are firstly going to study about the concept of right to silence. Then we are also going to see the constitutional provisions regarding it. We are also going to analyze who can exercise this right to silence in India. Then we are also going to see the exceptions of this right to silence, and we are also going to study about the Supreme Court rulings in this regard. Lastly, we'll see a practice question for your prelims examination and a practice question for your mains examination. So if I talk about the background of our today's topic, in a recent case, the Supreme Court has held that accused persons cannot be forced to speak by the investigating or interrogating agencies. They cannot be exposed to such statements which will self-incriminate them. So this brings us to the moot question of our today's discussion, that what exactly is this right to silence? So if I talk about this right to silence, it means that if someone is accused of a crime, they have the right to remain silent and not answer questions or provide information which is self-incriminating in nature, that would expose them to criminal proceedings. And if I talk about the historical background of this right to silence, it has been borrowed from the English common law. And if you talk about the Constitution of the United States, then the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution, Fifth Amendment of US Constitution protects a person from giving such testimony that would incriminate him. So the Supreme Court said that all accused have a right to silence and investigators cannot force them to speak up or admit their guilt. So it is not a forceful thing. Confession is always, admission of guilt is always voluntarily in nature. It cannot be forced by the investigating agencies. The Supreme Court also held in this case that right to silence is a constitutional provision. Constitutional provision that is guaranteed to every accused in India. Then secondly, the burden of proof is on the prosecution. Prosecution's burden of proof. So whenever a person files a case against another person, the prosecution who has filed that case against that person has to prove his guilt beyond reasonable doubt. So it is the prosecution's burden of proof. Thirdly, cooperation. Cooperation does not mean confession. Does not mean confession. So just because an accused person is cooperating with the investigating or interrogating agencies does not mean he has confessed to his crime, does not mean he has admitted his guilt. And lastly, not giving confession cannot limit freedom. Cannot limit freedom. So what do I mean by this? What does the Supreme Court mean about this? So you cannot just, just because a person is refusing to give confession, you cannot violate their personal freedom under Article 21. Personal freedom under Article 21. Neither can you limit their freedom by arresting them. Limit their freedom by arresting them. So until and unless there are incriminating evidences against the accused, just because they are not ready to confess or not ready to give in to the pressure, you cannot arrest them. You cannot limit their freedom. You cannot violate their personal liberty under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Moving forward, let us analyze the constitutional provisions which guarantee right to silence in India. So, Article 20 is a very important right. It grants protection against arbitrary and excessive punishment to an accused person, whether citizen or foreigner or legal person like a company or a corporation. So, Article 20 gives three protections. Protection against ex post facto laws. Ex post facto laws. Protection against double jeopardy. Double jeopardy. And protection against self-incrimination. Self-incrimination. So, all of these protections, that means the protection against ex post facto laws, the protection against double jeopardy, the protection against self-incrimination has been guaranteed to us by Article 20 of the Indian Constitution. So, no self-incrimination, no person accused of any offence shall be compelled to be a witness against himself, and that is explicitly provided under Article 20 clause 3 of our Indian Constitution. So, 20 clause 3 states that no person accused of any offence shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. That means it is providing us the protection against self-incrimination, and this is a very important right that is guaranteed to the accused persons in India. Moving forward, let us analyze who can exercise this right to silence. So, the right to silence can only be exercised by an accused person. It cannot be exercised by a witness. So, a witness who has been called in the witness box to give an important piece of evidence cannot claim their right to silence just because they feel that the statements being made are incriminating in nature. So, they cannot claim their right to silence. It is available only to the accused person in India. Moreover, protection under Article 20 clause 3 is not available to a person who is being interrogated under the Customs Act 1962 or Foreign Exchange Management Act of 1999, because they are not considered to be accused persons in India, and that is why this protection under Article 20 clause 3 is not available for questioning under the Customs Act or the FEMA Act. Moving forward, let us analyze some of the exceptions which are available to the right to silence. So, any right, any constitutional right is not absolute in nature. It is subject to reasonable restrictions. So, what are the reasonable restrictions on the right to silence? Let us analyze. So, in India, the right to silence is limited only to criminal cases. You cannot claim this right in civil cases, because if this right is given to the accused person in civil cases, they will plead their right and go on committing more such civil crimes. That is why it is only available in the criminal cases and not in the civil cases. Moreover, under the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988, the accused person from whom unaccounted monies or properties disproportionate to his known sources of income are recovered cannot seek protection under Article 20 clause 3. Moreover, if the crime is committed has been against national security of India, integrity of India and other such cases, and which is very grave in nature, then also you cannot claim your protection under Article 20 clause 3. You cannot claim your right to silence. Moving forward, let us analyze some of the Supreme Court rulings related to the right to silence or right against self-incrimination. So, in Nandini Satpathy versus P.L. Rani case, the Supreme Court stated that compelling a person to answer a question within the limits of the police station may result in a violation of Article 20 clause 3, because confessions which are given in police station are prohibited. Okay, and that is why Article 20 clause 3 comes into play, and those confessions are not legal. They are violative of Article 20 clause 3, because there is always an apprehension that police will give a third degree torture and make you confess the guilt. Okay, Then in Selvi versus State of Karnataka, the Supreme Court held that a narco-analysis test without the consent of the accused would amount to a violation of the right against self-incrimination. So, polygraph test, narco-analysis test, all these tests are prohibited without the explicit consent of the accused. You cannot do unconsensual polygraph test and narco-analysis test of the accused and prove that evidence in the court. It should be voluntarily in nature. Moving forward, in 2019, the Supreme Court in its ruling in Ritesh Sinha versus the state of Uttar Pradesh broadened the parameters of handwriting samples to include voice samples, adding that this would not violate the right against self-incrimination. So, in this case, the Supreme Court has said that voice samples can be taken if the crime is grave in nature, and this would not violate the right under Article 20 clause 3 of the Indian Constitution. In fact, asking for photographs, asking for fingerprint samples, asking for DNA samples, etc. is also not violative of Article 20 clause 3 of our Indian Constitution. With this, we come to a conclusion of our today's discussion. We have seen what is right to silence. We have also examined the persons who can claim the right to silence. We have also seen some of the exceptions and some of the important Supreme Court rulings and the constitutional provisions related to the right to silence. Now, let us see a practice question for your prelims examination. So, the question is, consider the following statements. So, statement number 1 is, a person cannot be prosecuted or punished twice for the same offence by virtue of Article 20 of our Indian Constitution. Your statement number 2 is, no person accused of any offence shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. Which of the following statements given above are correct? Your options are, option A is 1 only, option B is 2 only, option C is both 1 and 2, and option D is neither 1 nor 2. Kindly drop your answer in the comment box below. Now let us analyze a practice question for your mains examination. So the question is, critically analyze the right against self-incrimination. So firstly, you will write what is right to silence, what has the Supreme Court recently said about this right. Then you will write the constitutional provision of Article 20. Then you will also write the persons who are entitled to claim right to silence, the exceptions, and you will write the Supreme Court rulings in this regard, and then you can conclude holistically that yes, right to silence is a very important right that is given to every accused in a criminal case in India and helps him save against self-incriminating statements. So you can conclude very holistically. I hope this session was insightful for you. If you have any feedback regarding this session, kindly drop it in the comment box below. If you liked today's discussion and found it to be helpful, kindly like the video and subscribe to our channel for more such updates. Thank you.